Hello, friends. Craig Ballard, Locked On Blue Jays. Locked On Blue Jays, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Toronto Blue Jays return home fresh off a series win versus the hated New York Yankees. And today we're joined by Locked On White Sox as we're going to deep dive and get you set for this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday series at Rogers Center between the White Sox and the Blue Jays.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Craig Ballard. I am Locked On Blue Jays. I am thankful that you're choosing to spend part of your day talking Blue Jay baseball with me. I certainly hope you like what you saw this weekend. Taking 2 out of 3 at the Bronx. That's going to be a yes, please. I want to say a shout out and hello to some new YouTube subscribers on the Locked On Podcast YouTube channel, Toronto Internal and Michael Donnelly. Everydayers making Locked On Blue Jays their first podcast listen. Certainly want to shout you out and thank you as well. Getting stories and anecdotes of people out and about, seeing Blue Jay fans and letting them know about Locked On Blue Jays. So I want to thank you there. I also want to remind you, if you're out and about, remember now you can catch Toronto Blue Jay games on Sirius XM. 3-3 road trip for the Blue Jays, 13-9 overall, 9-7 on the road. I'm going to say yes, please, to everything above there. The 3-3 road trip, that Houston series wasn't great at all. But 13-9 overall. Now, everydayers will recall this because we've talked a few times on Locked On Blue Jays about how difficult the schedule is early on for the Toronto Blue Jays. 25 of the first 37 games are on the road. And immediately following that, the Blue Jays will play 17 straight games in 17 straight days. Usually over the course of 17 days, you have at least 2, maybe even 3 days off in there. Blue Jays won't have any. And again, that's right on the heels of this really heavy road schedule early on. So to be 13-9, 9-7 on the road, I know the rest of the American League East has been absolute fire as well. I know this. We see what Tampa Bay is doing, yes. But for the Blue Jays to be right there in the thick of things, despite the difficult early schedule, I'm pretty pleased. Certainly need more from the offense. The offense, there was nothing really to be too excited about on this road trip. They scored 2, 4, 1, 6, 2, 5. 20 runs. 2, 4, 1, 6, 2, 5. With runners in scoring position, oh boy. 0 for 3, so they lost 3 games on this road trip. 0 for 3 in the first loss with runners in scoring position. 0 for 4 the second loss. 0 for 9 the third loss. So if they had any hits with runners in scoring position, those were the 3 wins that we saw on this road trip. And 0 for 17 combined with runners in scoring position in the 3 losses. Oh boy. How about the top of this Blue Jay lineup? Yes, we like, the flexibility that's been brought into the bottom of this lineup, the Whit Merrifields, the Kevin Kiermaiers, guys like that. Yes, very true. But the heavy lifting's got to be done by the top of this lineup. George Springer, 2 for 25 on this road trip. George Springer's hitting 163 since that 5-hit performance in the opening game of the season. Remember his season opener, went 5 for 6? He was incredible. 2 for 25 on this road trip, hitting 163. Now, we'll say this about George Springer, and you're going to hear a lot about this in our crossover conversations with Locked On White Sox as we get you set for this Blue Jays White Sox series. George Springer has hit in the past anyway, these upcoming Chicago White Sox pitchers very well. So hopefully the cure for what ails George Springer is about to walk in the door. Bo Bichette was on fire. That was a 4 for 22 road trip for Bo Bichette. Oh boy. Vlad, just 5 for 23. Now, at least we can say Vlad did have a pair of key home runs in this road trip. So definitely some glass half full for Vlad, but just 5 for 23 overall. We know that he's significantly capable of significantly better than that. Matt Chapman was on fire. 2 hits in that Yankees series finale. Good, but overall just 5 for 22 on the road trip. Oh boy. And Dalton Varsho. Yes, Dalton Varsho homered, went back-to-back with Vlad in that series finale at New York on Sunday. Fantastic. Loved it. But in his last 35 at-bats, Dalton Varsho, 4 hits. 4 hits in his last 35 at-bats. Oh, boy. Saw some great pitching, some great starting pitching on this road trip. How about one full time through the rotation? The last 5 starts, everyone in the rotation obviously getting a turn there. The last one full time through the rotation, really good. In there, we saw Alek Manoah have his best start of the season. We saw Chris Bassett in there have his, at least likely anyway, his best start of the season. And Kevin Gausman. Can we talk about Kevin Gausman? Yes, Kevin Gausman started this that 6-game road trip with whatever that first inning was at Houston, allowed 7 runs. He just got rocked. Like, it was absolutely insane. Now, outside of that 7-run, whatever that was from Gausman in Houston, he's thrown 30 2/3 innings this season, 3 runs allowed. That's a 0.88 ERA. Is that good? Holy moly. Over that span, 30 and 2/3 innings pitched. That's a legit sample size. 3 walks, 30 strikeouts. I'm going to say that again. 3 walks, 30 strikeouts. Kevin Gausman has been awesome. Chi Sox come in at 7 and 15. They've played 13 road games. They've won just 4. New manager in town. It's not going well. This year, they're coming in fresh as well, of having been swept this past weekend by the Tampa Bay Rays. I know who isn't being swept these days by the Tampa Bay. Well, not the Blue Jays, but it was in Tampa. They haven't lost at home yet. I know, but the White Sox overall, wow, really tough start to the season for them. Series is Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. All 3 days were joined by Locked On White Sox to deep dive these matchups. That's Nick from Locked On White Sox, and he brings a lot of great conversation. So I hope you do get a chance to check out all 3 days. Monday and Tuesdays are 7:07 p.m. Eastern first pitches. Wednesday's an afternoon game at 1:07 p.m. Eastern. Now let's dive into our crossover conversation with Locked On White Sox to get you set for tonight's game. I am Craig Ballard. I am Locked On Blue Jays. Absolutely thrilled to be doing this crossover episode as the Toronto Blue Jays Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday will play host. No offense to Nick, but I hope it's not too good of a host to the Chicago White Sox. So I had to get Nick from Locked On White Sox in here for this crossover conversation. Nick, first of all, I mean, my goodness, I think we need a tour because this is an impressive looking background you've got here. So walk us through some of the Chicago White Sox stuff that we're looking at here. I'm loving this.
Oh, Craig, this is just, I'm a collector. So, and as a season ticket holder, I definitely don't miss those stadium giveaways. So when there's bobbleheads, when there's whatever, I'm there in line for it. This is many years of just, packing stuff away, collecting, hoarding it from decades and decades. And then, I've kind of turned my basement into just kind of a shrine. So, when they said, hey, make sure you have a good background for Locked On, that was not a problem for me at all.
Who are some of the so over your, what would that be, over your left shoulder, I guess? Who are those 4 bobbleheads up there?
So I've got Liam Hendriks.
Was Liam Hendriks. I mean, this guy plays, he beats to his own drum, but I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah, he became a fan favorite instantly when he came on board, and we saw him in the 2020 playoffs when we faced the A's, and he dominated. Again, a series that I think the Sox should have won, but Hendriks just, such a dominating closer, and he came on board, and he's been battling something much bigger than baseball, and just wonderful news coming out that cancer's remission. He's good to kind of even start practicing a little bit, which he has put up on his Twitter account. I think he's throwing, and who knows what the timetable's like, but gosh, he has been electric for the White Sox over the last few years.
Things keep going. Side note, things keep going the way they are, Nick. We may be revisiting this conversation, Liam Hendriks trade deadline to the Blue Jays. But anyway, we'll get there. We'll get there. More with Locked On White Sox in a moment. Locked On Blue Jays and Locked On White Sox, both, of course, proud parts of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I wanted to mention that Pro Baseball GM is one of the coolest games I've played in a while. I always thought I could be a great Major League general manager, and it turns out not all that easy. If you've had the same thought and fantasize about managing your own franchise, go and download Pro Baseball GM immediately. The game allows you to manage every strategic aspect of a franchise. You play through seasons, and you lead your franchise and fans to glory as you build a historic franchise. In the simulation, you're responsible for hiring the right coaches and staff. You manage your team finances, you scout and draft players, and you manage through difficult personalities and injuries, navigating your franchise through free agency and all the ups and downs of a season. All of that in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Baseball GM is completely free to play, and it's playable offline, so you play on the go as you want, when you want. Locked On Blue Jay listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On in the game store, so make sure to check that out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up in the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com. Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. There, but you did touch on something, and I don't want to start this on a sour note, Nick. I don't want you to just hang up on me here, but you did touch on Luis Robert Jr. and Eloy Jimenez. A couple years ago, I'd say maybe 2 years ago now, but a year and a half, 2 years ago. I mean, I for a while there thought that over the next 5 years, there'll be at least 3 times where the Blue Jays and White Sox would butt heads in the playoffs. Like, I thought Eloy was going to be your version of Slim Daddy Vladdy, and like the young talent that the White Sox had coming up. I thought the arrow was pointed upwards. I thought they would rule this, no offense, and not so great division. I thought it was going to be collision courses left, right, and I thought there was going to be a bit of a rivalry going on here, Nick, with Blue Jays and White Sox in the playoffs. One of the sides has maintained that. The other one, Nick, I'm sorry to say your side, my gosh, not holding up that end of the bargain. What's happened to the development and what I really thought was the promise of this White Sox team?
Yeah, you're hitting such a nerve with
no
the fan base. No, I mean, but that's the ultimate question: is what went wrong? And this off season, basically the front office for the Chicago White Sox said to the fan base, without saying it, like, our plan is hinged on hope, luck, health, and a return to accustomed levels. And well, that works to a certain degree, but there are certain levels we just don't even know about. I don't know what Eloy Jimenez's ceiling is, and I really don't know what Luis Robert Jr.'s ceiling is. And Tom Verducci on the Fox broadcast yesterday on Saturday during the Rays Sox game had an outstanding point. Luis Robert, I think, has struck out 6 or 7 times in the series so far. He cannot lay off of sliders, and Verducci said, until he proves that he can have some plate discipline, we won't know what his ceiling is. He is making it way too easy on pitchers. And that's just, putting the microscope on that one little thing. But health has been a big problem.
Yeah.
Eloy Jimenez has not been able to stay healthy, a lot of soft tissue injuries. Luis Robert has actually stayed healthy this season and has been playing solid defense for the most part, but offensively had a hot start, and over the last couple of weeks now has really cooled off. It is there's no secrets in Major League Baseball right now. When a pitcher knows where you're struggling, they are going to keep going at it until you prove them otherwise. Why shouldn't they?
Yeah.
And and that's what's happening right now. Yohan Moncada, dealing with back issues. He's been on the IL for a while. Tim Anderson, really the guy that gets everything going for this White Sox team. That I think if you ask a lot of fans, they would like him to be the first $100 million man in this organization and build around Tim Anderson. I don't know if that's going to happen. He's been out with a knee issue. So again, over the last couple of years, so much promise. Money hasn't been spent right at all. We haven't had, the Sox go after a generational talent, someone that, really can turn heads in the starting rotation or a position player. The guys that we thought are going to develop and be monsters haven't. And I don't know why, really. We're just really a lot of fingers are being pointed. It's been a tough couple of years.
Excuse me. What I'm really seeing in Robert Jr. is in Blue Jay land. It was Teoscar Hernandez as he was coming up. You did not need to throw a strike. If you could throw that slider anywhere. Teoscar was willing to play your little reindeer games. He was chasing it. And once that discipline got to where it needed to be, things really took off. And it's the Teoscar Hernandez that you see now. So certainly there's hope for Robert Jr. And as you said, you have to like how he stayed healthy this season. Boy, listening to you talk there, Nick, really makes me appreciate even more the Shapiro and Atkins era here in Toronto, because they have built for the first time in franchise history a sustainable contender. Right, this is this will be what made the playoffs in 2020, didn't make it in 2021. To be honest, strictly because of COVID, missed the playoffs by one game. To be honest with you, because of COVID, and then 2022 made the playoffs. Will make the playoffs this season. So that's 3 out of 4 seasons again. That 2021 without the COVID, not allowing them to play any home games until the very end of the season. That's probably 4 years in a row of making the playoffs. It's at least going to be 3 out of 4 again. And I think they'll be in contention again next year as well, right? So it kind of makes me appreciate the window, the contention that's been built here. And especially when you talk about the things that, boy, even when we've tried for free, so the development hasn't worked for the White Sox. We don't know why. And even things in free agency have gone wonky, haven't had a lot of success there. Boy, Blue Jays last few years, Hyunjin Ryu. Now, you can debate how successful the Hyunjin Ryu was for the Blue Jays on the field, but And why am I blanking? Scott Boris will tell you that move signaled, hey, look who's back in business. Look who's back in the business of winning baseball games, the Toronto Blue Jays. So it was a really big signal for free agents going forward. Here comes George Springer. Here comes the trade for Matt Chapman. Here comes the trade for Whit Merrifield. Here comes Chris Bassett. So really makes me appreciate what's going on here in Toronto. And when I look at what's going on here in Toronto in 2023, I have to say, Nick, I really feel that this is one of one of a very small handful of teams who very legitimately, every team saying, hey, World Series is the goal this year. Why not? Even at 7-14, I get the White Sox would be saying, hey, why not? Right? It's still early enough to have that point of view. But for the Blue Jays, I just really hardcore believe that it will be World Series or bust for the Blue. Maybe not in World Series championship, Nick, but going to the World Series or bust for the Jays this season, just from what's been spent and how it's been built. What's a successful season look like? Because no offense, Nick, but I don't think you're saying, oh, Craig, same World Series or bust for the White Sox. I don't think you'll be saying that. But what does a successful 2023 look like to you? Maybe just as simple as answering some of the questions you're saying you have. I don't know. What does it look like for you?
Well, coming into the season off of an 81-81 season, that was one of the most disappointing seasons in recent White Sox history. I was looking for a team that was going to be better prepared under new manager, first-time big league manager Pedro Grifol, a team that was fundamentally sound, a team that would play with a sense of urgency, through April and May games and not fall too far behind. It felt like, the team just would capitalize on what they have, which on paper was a really impressive roster, top to down. And I think that's what a lot of Sox fans, and for me personally, why I was able to make an argument heading into the season, especially in a pretty watered down weak AL Central, is look at this lineup. Now, there were bullpen question marks for sure, and I wasn't really sold on the starting five. I thought maybe the top three I could put against the rest of the Central, but the lineup was solid. But that was, again, if everybody stayed healthy and they lived up to what they were supposed to do. And Pedro Grifol and his new coaching staff, figured it out and was able to unlock the potential. And we heard a lot about chemistry. Everything sounded great, of course, out of spring training. Grifol was saying all the right things. And right now, the Sox are basically on pace of where they were last season. So a successful year right now is if the Sox can get a little healthy, kind of right the ship, stop beating themselves, win some of these close games. And I would really say, nip at the heels of whoever is at the top of the Central. Right now, it's the Twins, and, make it competitive. If they could, they're not going to be a wild card team, but if they could try to make it competitive throughout, the trade deadline period, I don't have a lot of faith, honestly, that the front office will make the right decisions. But anything can happen with the AL Central. So a successful season really would be to win the Central, and everything after that, there's absolutely no confidence that they would go anywhere. Now, to what's happening with Toronto, and that's what I look at sometimes with like AL East teams, is there is so much competition in the AL East, for example. You have to keep up with the Joneses. You have to spend. You have to be smart. Because if you're not, you will be just eaten up and you will be left, in the dust. Where in the Sox situation, I just think they play down to their competition and they say to themselves, well, we don't have to do terribly much. It's the AL Central. So we'll just run it back and hope for the best.
It's such good points about the AL. I mean, right now, I'm pretty sure that, like you said, the Twins are in first. As we tape this on Sunday, hopefully your White Sox are not going to get swept by the Rays, and hopefully the Blue Jays will finish off the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. But as we tape this right here, right now, the Minnesota Twins in first place. That's an 11-10 team, Nick. So to your point, that's an 11-10 team. That's a team that's going to be laughed right out of the American League East because you're going to be sent to the basement in the American League East. So you're right about that. Yeah. Now, Nick, let's turn to the series specifics here. So game one, Monday night, Lance Lynn against Chris Bassett. Two veteran pitchers. It feels to me, Nick, going in very different directions. Chris Bassett, if you look on the surface, you say, well, Craig is 5.4 ERA. What are you asking me to be excited about here? Well, that's that 5.4 ERA, that his opening game as a Blue Jay, the first pitch he ever threw as a Blue Jay was deposited for a home run, and then 2 pitches later, another one. So 3 pitches into his Blue Jay tenure, 2 home runs. In that first game at St. Louis, got pulled in the fourth inning, Nick. He allowed 9 runs. And him after the game. So if you're pulled in the fourth inning, Nick, and then you speak to the media after the game, what's that? That's 2 hours. That's 2.5 hours later. His eyes were still, he was still so stunned, Nick, absolutely stunned. Like the St. Louis approach just blew him out of the water. He was not expecting that. So really, it's one of those, it's really turned out to be the dictionary definition, Nick, of one of those starts that you crumple up in a ball, you throw it out the window, and you move on. And Chris Bassitt, the veteran, has done exactly that. 18 and a third innings pitched since then, only 4 runs allowed, only 10 hits allowed. Now 9 walks in that 18 and a third. So yes, that's too many. Yes, but Nick, he's coming off a game with just 1 walk allowed and a gem at Houston as well. So, I mean, this guy has got it turned around. His last 8 and a third innings for Chris Bassitt have been scoreless. Other side of the coin, Lance Lynn. Boy, oh boy, Nick, again, I feel like I'm going to be poking the bear here when I say, my God, you couldn't have been looking for this. I thought he was good, maybe not great with Team USA, but I thought he was good with Team USA. He's been downright bad with the White Sox. White Sox have lost all 4 of his starts. He faced the Blue Jays in Chicago last season, and the Jays did okay. But the bad news is the big hits in that game were from Raimel Tapia. So that's not an option. That's not an option today. But geez, on paper, it's 2 pitchers that are struggling. But I got to say, Nick, Chris Bassitt's arrows pointed upwards. I don't think you can say the same about Lance Lynn. What is happening with Lance Lynn? What are you looking for? What are you expecting in this Monday night game?
Well, Lance Lynn has to just be so much more efficient with his pitches. I think his last outing, he threw 35 in the first inning, and he's settled down, but that's a lot. And he's he's not what he was a couple of years ago. He's had some injury issues, some knee problems. He's been relatively healthy. All the good stuff you want to hear out of his offseason, he was saying it. And I feel like he liked ramping up for World Baseball. Like it got him ready to go. Now, the home run is the biggest issue for Lance
6
Lynn.
already this year, Nick. Holy
He
moly.
gives them up. And
holy moly.
He had a really rough home outing against the San Francisco Giants, which really ate our lunch in early April, and it hasn't really gotten back on track. He throws several varieties of a cut fastball with varying speeds, but what has been the problem is his pitch cuts into a swinger's zone. I mean, his breaking stuff is getting way too much of the plate. It's not tailing out of the zone. He's not mixing up eye levels. And it is getting absolutely crushed as it should. I mean, that's what Pedro Grifol said after his last outing. Opponents are hitting his mistakes. Well, that's what a good opponent should do. They should hit mistakes. Lance Lynn knows it. He knows that, he has really struggled. What he said after his last start was, I've been here before and I turned out fine. So I guess that's a good, mentality to have, but it is time now for him to put a good outing in. That it's all about preparation with anybody in Major League Baseball. And I just hope that the scouting report, they have a solid plan against the Blue Jays, and then it's about executing it.
Boy, you said a few things in there that are just music to Blue Jay fans' ears. First of all, you talk about the preparation. That's what I covet about Chris Bassitt, Nick. That's why he was able to flush that. Chris Bassitt, to me, feels just so veteran, right? Whatever you need to be doing during days 1 through 4 before your next start, whatever you need to be doing for that legit preparation, he does that. But Blue Jay fans' ears would have perked right up when you mentioned Lance Lynn's struggles in the first inning. When the Blue Jays have gotten trouble, that's been the issue. Getting absolutely smoked in first innings. The games they've lost, they've constantly been playing from behind and just couldn't climb that mountain. You also mentioned the home runs. Lance Lynn over his career has done fairly well at Rogers Center, but it is worth mentioning he is a home run per start at Rogers Center, as you were talking about, just giving up so many this season and this season as well, Nick. Let's keep in mind these fences at the Rogers Center have been moved way in, so probably not a lot of cure for what ails a home run pitcher here. Now, Matt Chapman has seen Lance Lynn a lot, 2 for 17 versus Lynn. Those 2 are home runs. Whit Merrifield has been dominated by Lance Lynn. So hopefully for you guys, Nick, some cause for optimism there. Now, what I like is Kiermaier and Springer have hit Lance Lynn well. So I love the idea of Kiermaier in that 9 spot doing well. I hope turning that lineup over for George Springer, who's a guy that needs to get hot. And Nick, this may be bad timing for the Chicago White Sox because George Springer has been struggling mightily, but he's had some at-bats on this road trip where, wow, you can see, oh my goodness, he's very, very, very close to coming out of this. So Going to get you back to our crossover conversation with Locked On White Sox in just a moment. And remember that Locked On White Sox is in the house tomorrow, too, as we deep dive Tuesday's game, Mike Clevenger versus Jose Barrios. But first, wanted to remind you that if you're out and about, if you're on the go, don't forget you can catch the Blue Jay games on your Sirius XM app. And also wanted to mention this show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Now, some of our best times in our life are when we learn things about ourselves. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk things through. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. So for things like learning positive coping skills, learning how to set boundaries, it empowers you to be the best version of yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonmlb to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, help, HELP.com/lockedonmlb. Also, I mean, are you like me? Are you always looking for a delicious snack? Yeah, right? But not one with all the sugar and calories. Well, if that is describing you as well, then you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever built, and it is called Built. I mean, you've got to try Built if you haven't already. Built bars and puffs are healthier snack choices that do not compromise on taste. Built bars are healthy and taste so good, it'll have you checking to make sure, hey, these are good for me, right? Now, what makes Built bars so good? Well, for starters, covered in 100% real dark chocolate. Yeah, you did hear that correctly. Real chocolate. And they've got some unbelievable flavors as well. Churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream, to name a few. Cookies and cream? Yes, please. I'm not sure how Built does it, but I mean, these bars taste like candy bars while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is they're healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. Built.com has you covered, and now you can even get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. Yeah, that's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built bars. You can thank me later. Now, on Chris Bassett's side, Eloy has hit Bassett. Eloy's 3 for 5 with a pair of walks against Bassett. So maybe on the other side of the coin, maybe Bassett has the cure for what ails Eloy. Now, Elvis Andrus and Yasmani Grandal, these two are combined 1 for 15 with 5 strikeouts. Do you see any cause for optimism? Is there anything going on with the way Grandal or Andrus is playing right now that gives you cause for optimism, Nick, that they actually may be okay in this series, in this game?
Yes, Yasmani Grandal is a completely different player than he was last year. So if you're going to rest on Yasmani Grandal and think you're going to get a 2022 at bat, he will beat you. He has had an impressive start to the season, and it goes back to his off season. You want to go hockey? I'll go hockey with you here. He trained with the assistant goalie coach for the Chicago Blackhawks in terms of blocking techniques. And he worked on his lower half. He stayed in Chicago during the offseason. Why would you want to do that? I don't know, but he did. And he trained, and he knew that he needed to get his legs strong, not only for the durability behind the plate, but that's where his power comes from offensively. And we've seen better numbers at the plate. He's had a pretty nice little Tampa series. Eloy Jimenez has homered in 2 straight games in Tampa. Right, Yasmani Grandal, I would say, boy, if your Blue Jays pitchers haven't figured out the difference between 2022 Grandal and 2023, Grandal will make you pay.
That'll wrap up Monday's episode of Locked On Blue Jays. Locked On Blue Jays, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be sure to tune in tomorrow as we continue our crossover conversation with Locked On White Sox. We deep dive and get you ready for Tuesday's White Sox Blue Jays game. If you're going to be in attendance for tonight's game, I will too. I use the Game Time app to get some seats that I'm very excited about. Section 141 in the first row there. So absolutely feel free to come by and say hello.